Hey, before we jump in, you should know that this is the second strategy I'm sharing about how to start a business while still paying student loans. I shared one last week, and then this coming Friday, I'm going to be sharing all 7 on a live webinar. So be sure to register for that webinar so you can get all 7 strategies and the chance to get your questions answered live. To register, visit overflowyourpossibility.com/webinar. Now, let's pretend you want to get into the movie making business. There are a few major players in the industry, and it takes a lot of money to compete with them. Yet, in recent history, a few companies have proven it's possible. For example, you could go the route of Marvel and just start, and you start making movies and films after decades and decades of being in a related business. And just like Marvel, you might license characters and eventually be owned by Disney to really make it work. Chances are, though, if you're reading this blog, you probably haven't even been alive as long as Marvel has been in operation. I mean, they officially started in 1939, but their modern incarnation dates to 1961. But overall, whichever date you were born, it's unlikely that their route would work for you. Instead, you might go the route of a company like Netflix. They started in 1997, simply shipping DVDs in the mail. From what I've heard, they would go to the big box store down the street and purchase the DVDs before, then mailing them to people. It was a pretty small way to start. From there, they were able to raise $30 million 2 years later in 1999, and then they switched 10 years later in 2007 to an online streaming service, which switching to the online streaming was no small feat and an entirely different business model. And then they continued to grow, and in 2013, 16 years after they started, that's when they first created their first original content, House of Cards. Again, not a small feat and an entirely different business model, but they got into the movie making or the show making business. Of course, the story is way more complicated, but the point that I'm getting at is how small they started. The 2 men who founded the company had a lot of money, but they still started really small and they've laddered up from there. And there are other examples of companies that have done this. Amazon just started selling books, and now they even host Netflix's data. They're huge. Now, if you're familiar with this blog, you know, on the one hand, I'm not always a big fan of creating these giant corporations that have so much power. Remember, Spider-Man's uncle famously said, "With great power comes great responsibility." And in fact, if you read this blog regularly, you'll know that I'm on the side of local independent businesses. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of the big dream you probably have for you and your business. And it might not be as big as a movie making business or becoming an internet giant. And that's probably a good thing if we're honest with ourselves. To you, though, your dream is big. And I totally get that. My dream to open a single coffee shop in Chicago was a big, scary, audacious dream to me when I first started. A big reason I was able to move that dream into a reality was that I started with my own version of small. For me, it was selling bags of coffee beans. I would literally take orders in advance, get on the Blue Line L train, our public transit for those unfamiliar with Chicago, and I'd have an empty suitcase with me. I would go to the roaster, I'd get bags of coffee from the roaster, take the L with my full suitcase back to my own neighborhood, and distribute those beans directly to people's condos. It was totally not scalable, but it had quite a few advantages. I got some cash flow going. It proved that people liked us and wanted us to get going. It meant that we had customers already when we finally opened. The biggest point is that it didn't require any money up front, and I could start really quickly. I already had a suitcase, and the customers paid me in advance. So then I would have the money to go and pay the roaster for the coffee beans. So what about you? How can you start small with your business? Ask yourself, what could I start selling tomorrow? I'm pausing to let you sort of ruminate on that. But this next part is where it gets most exciting. I mean, that's pretty exciting. This is also exciting. Maybe not most exciting, but it's also exciting. As you start small and you leverage those small beginnings to see your dream reach fulfillment, you'll start to see more clearly the next rung on the ladder. Now, who knows if the people who started Netflix or Amazon knew, when they first started, where they would be today. My guess is they probably didn't, but they still felt, like selling books on the internet or shipping DVDs in the mail. They still probably felt like those dreams were big, but probably not as big as where they are now. The point here is to focus on the dream you have today and to get started as quickly as possible. And once today's dream is accomplished, there might be another dream that appears in the future. And that dream will take you and your business to the next level, but you don't have to worry about that now. You can start small and let the future take care of itself. And, I've talked a lot about what to do in terms of starting small and laddering up, but let me share my opinion on what not to do. I highly suggest not laddering up too quickly. You don't want to shortchange your initial dream. You want to make sure you learn all lessons you can with your current rung on the ladder before you move on to the next. Unfortunately, people who move up the ladder too quickly often end up back at the ground with nothing to show for it. So take your time and milk each rung for all it's worth. You can't rush the process. Remember, Netflix shipped DVDs in the mail for 10 years before they switched and went to the next rung on the ladder. You can't rush the process. So wrapping up, there are two things that sort of summarize these ideas that older, wiser people have said to me along my journey that helped me figure out this idea of starting small and being able to ladder up later, and I hope you find them inspiring. The first one, success isn't where you are, it's how far you've come. It's your journey and no one else's. Define success not by how much you accumulate or where you are compared with someone else. Measure your success by how far you've come or by how far you go from where you currently are. Success isn't where you are, it's how far you've come. And then the second one is go as far as you can see, and then you'll go farther. If you feel like your vision is relatively small, you're probably in a better place than those with larger dreams. You have the opportunity to focus and start small and see that vision through, and then look around and see what's next. You're much more likely to enjoy the process of this, first starting small, this first rung of the ladder, rather than always thinking of the next rung and the next rung and the next rung. So go as far as you can see, and then you'll see farther. But wait, there's more. One more reminder, like I mentioned when we first started, we've created this free webinar for you. You can register at overflowyourpossibility.com/webinar. And this strategy I presented today is only one of 7 proven strategies. You could check out one another one of them if you look at last week's blog post. We're not going to be sharing all of them on the blog, so you have to come to this webinar if you want all 7. And who wouldn't want to know the strategies to not only start your journey, but to leave a legacy and have financial freedom through this whole journey of starting a business and seeing it through to, completion and profitability and all those things. The official title is 7 Proven Strategies for Starting a Business While Still Paying Student Loans Without Refinancing or a Rich Relative. Those are not 2 of the strategies, and all 7 are proven because we've done them and we've seen some other people do them as well. So be sure to check out the times and claim your spot today at overflowyourpossibility.com/webinar. I'll talk to you again next week, and I hope to see you Friday at the webinar. In the meantime, keep overflowing. Peace.